This week on Between Two Beers, we've put together a best of compilation. In this episode, we revisit some of our best clips from episodes that have been categorised as business, culture and or entertainment. Guests in this one include Greg Foran, Bill Bailey, Dr. Alia Bojilova, Rowan Simpson, Geoff Ross, Girls Get Off, Jay Reeve, Al Brown, Toni Street, Simon Barnett, Jared Savage and Brent Impey. It's a hell of a list and there's so much gold in this one. This episode is brought to you by our proud sponsors, TAB. Got a hunch? Download the app today and get your bet on. Seamus and I are also stoked to now be in partnership and dressed by Barkers. Check out their range at barkersonline.co.nz. In episode 206, we talked to then Air New Zealand CEO Greg Foran, and before he was with Air New Zealand, he was the CEO of Walmart. And we talk about in 2014 what it was like running a retailer with 1.5 million staff, over 460 stores with an annual GDP of $300 billion.
So that was good, and that gave my wife and I the opportunity to move from Shenzhen and get across the border into Hong Kong. And that lasted about 6 weeks. And then I had the phone call to say, look, we'd like you to come and run the US.
No interview, just you're the guy.
Yeah, I'd been reasonably known to the business at that point. So no, there wasn't an interview, and I didn't need to think too long about whether I should do that job. I had never for one moment considered that I would. I don't think they'd ever put a non-American into that particular role. And I was completely blown away that I would have that opportunity. You know, it's an incredible business, you know, basically 5,000 stores, 1.5 million staff, 360 billion in turnover.
You're the guy.
24 billion. And
can I just delve into Between Two Beers kind of universe here? Because there's some parallels between your story and Zion Armstrong's story as well, who
I caught up with the other day. Yeah,
right. So I did want to know: are you both in Asia operating at the same time, and both in America operating at the same time ever?
We were in America, and we actually met one day in Walmart, and we were just having this conversation the other day. Him and I, we ran into each other, and he said, I can remember the meeting, but he can recall what I said. He got introduced or something, and I said something like, "You're a Kiwi. I can tell by your accent." So he was running Adidas US at that point.
Crazy. West Auckland. Hamilton. Who'd have thought?
Oh, you're a ambassador. Okay, so 2014. So Walmart's US operation was on a downturn. They're battling bad pay and working conditions. You're announced as the new CEO, the man to turn it all around. This huge appointment, and the White House needs to be informed of it. And I listened to an interview where you said that was the moment when you were like, oh, wow, I hope I'm up to it.
Yeah, it was a bit bizarre. I do remember that day very well, actually. I'd flown in from Hong Kong and landed into Chicago, and then the company jet had picked me up and brought me down to Arkansas. So, you know, all of this was a little bit new. You know, you've got a plane at your sort of disposal. And I can remember sitting in the office with the CEO, who's Doug McMillan, and we had just finished sort of signing the paperwork. You're, you know, at that point on what they call a Section 16 officer. So there's documentation that's got to be filled out and all the things that go with it. And we finished that, and there was just him and I sitting there, and he sort of sat back in the chair and he said, "Well, it's a heck of a day. Just want you to know that, you know, I've spoken to the White House." And I can remember looking at him and sort of thought, do I want to show my complete ignorance at this point or not? So I didn't say anything, and fortunately he carried on. He said, "Yeah, I just wanted to let them know that we'd put you into the role." Okay, that's great. And he said, "You know, I've had a chat with Tim Cook, runs Apple." Yeah. And I'm sitting there going, yeah. I'm sure Tim, why would Tim have any interest in whether or not I'm doing that role? But there were a series of things like that I realised that, I had a great role at that point in time. And he said something to me which has proved to be true. He said, you do realise that sort of within reason, you can sort of talk to anyone that you want to talk to. And I'd tell you, that has been incredibly helpful actually in this role at Air New Zealand. So, there's a new chief executive who's running Boeing, for example. And within a couple of weeks of him being appointed, I met with him. Mm. And I don't think it's maybe just because I worked at Walmart. I'm sure that's helped, but I think it's given me a degree of confidence that if I want to talk to someone, I just pick up the phone or the email and off I go. But there's no doubt that having had that job, particularly in the United States, it resonates.
It's a wild environment to operate in. Your news goes right to the very top. What other doors does it open? You're probably not the sort of person that does like throwing names on a table, but surely you've been in the presence of some pretty incredible people.
I have, and continue to do so. A, it's helpful for the business. B, it's good for me in terms of learning things. But yeah, I've had dinner with Warren Buffett.
Keep going.
Yeah, don't let us stop you.
We're digging. You're allowed to name drop here.
We open the door now. Yeah.
Oprah?
I have actually introduced Oprah on stage.
You get a Walmart. You get a Walmart.
Give us a W, give us an A, give us an L, give us a squiggly. Look, there's a whole bunch of people, and some of them are incredibly interesting. I sat down one night and I was having dinner with Ron Howard from Happy Days. Man. And, most of you won't remember Happy Days. I do, but he's now a film producer and has produced many good films. And we got into a great dialogue one night about my experiences of the role I was doing in America, because I saw America through a lens that most people don't see. I've been to every state multiple times, and most people, when they go to America, you go to LA or San Francisco, or Chicago, New York, Florida. I would go to, Muskogee, Oklahoma. I'd go to Meridian, Mississippi. I'd go to New Iberia, Louisiana. I went where there were Walmart stores, and there's 5,000 of them, and I've been to about 2,700 of them. Wow. And when I went to Chicago, I went to the south side of Chicago, which you may not know, but there's probably about 23 people killed every weekend in the south side of Chicago. It's tough. And so we got into a discussion around, what I saw in America. And I have a lens on that country, which probably some airline pilots have and a few other people, plenty of people who work at Walmart, obviously. But a lot of people don't. So, we got into a discussion, and he was thinking about actually doing a film on it. Look, I've met plenty of interesting people and still do. And I was just yesterday having a dialogue with the CFO of ChatGPT.
Yeah. Oh, I can get that get reimbursed for this. Subscription reimbursed that you signed up with this week.
So, I will catch up with her in a couple of weeks when I'm in the US, and that will be very useful. We've got about 2,500 people using AI in Air New Zealand today, and I want Air New Zealand to be at the forefront of AI.
Possibly an ignorant question again, but was it normal for the CEO of Walmart US to walk a store floor? Was that breaking the norm, or was that par for the course for previous CEOs?
I would tell you that Sam Walton, the Jack Shoemakers, David Glass, these are the people that did it, were religiously good at it. I studied Sam. I never got to meet him. I got to meet his lieutenants, and they taught me an awful lot. And I love nothing better than to get on the front line. It doesn't have to be a store. It can be at the airport. I worked out the other day, I think I've checked 20,000 people in for flights in the last 5 years. at either domestic or international. So I love getting on the front line. I like understanding how things work, getting close to the people. I try and get in stores once or twice a week. I was lucky. I had a jet, could stick 7 people on it. I could get anywhere in the US in 2 hours. And then get into stores and meet what we call our associates and understand what was happening in the business, and then get back to the office and put the curry amongst the team in the office, because, if they're doing their job right, then we end up running better stores.
I want to dig in on the size and scope of the job a little bit for the everyman. And you must have had this moment, I'm not sure how soon into it, where you just pinch yourself. Like the numbers you talked about, right? Like 1.5 million workers, nearly 5,000 stores, hundreds of $1 billion in annual revenue. You're the boss of America's biggest business. Did you have moments where it was overwhelming? And did you think about the numbers involved in what you were doing and what you were in charge of?
The simple answer to that is no. And I think there's a couple of reasons why that doesn't happen. I don't try and get caught up in the whole ego of the situation and the role. I'm got a real fear of failure, to be honest with you. And I think it's one of the things that drives me. I probably hate losing more than I like winning. And I didn't want to let anyone down. I don't want to let anyone down at Walmart. I don't want to let anyone down at Air New Zealand. I hate it when we cancel a flight. It's actually quite personal to me. And it's the same if we haven't got great fruit and veg, or we're out of stock of cereal, or, the assortment of jeans is not appropriate, then I want to get that fixed. The second thing is, you can't ever look at a job when it's of that scale and see everything. You can only see what's in your vision. If you hold your hands out to the side, I get to a point where I can't see my hands anymore. So I know what I can see and what I can't. And I worked out pretty early on that if you run one good store, then you work out how to run 10. And then if you work out how to run 10, you can run 100, and then you can run 1,000. And then if you put the right resources in place, you actually let the thing run. And so I didn't get caught up in it. There were events. We would run a shareholders event every single year, usually the first week in June, and we would get an associate from every second store. So one year it'd be stores with odd numbers, and the other year it'd be stores with even numbers. And this would be held at Fayetteville and in the Bud Walton Arena. And there'd be, 12, 15,000 people in this arena, and you'd go out on stage and present, and Elton John might be playing, or, Mariah Carey or Drew Barrymore might be following you on stage. So you would have moments like that where you would go, wow. I can remember one year I was up speaking and did my speech. We'd rehearse for it, and I'd have someone who would write the speech for me. And so I did it and came off stage and was heading to the restroom, and, a young woman stopped me and said, "Gee, that was fantastic. It was terrific." And I said to her, "Thanks very much." And, I was on my way to the restroom. I said, "What store are you from?" And she said, "I'm not. I'm Drew Barrymore." And you sort of feel a bit of a dick.
Was she really close to you? And
well, you just feel I can remember going back out and saying to my wife, I've just made a complete egghead of myself.
Greg.
But, you don't get, I honestly didn't get too caught up in it. I, as I said, my fear of failure is probably stronger than my will to win.
There's the good and the bad though, right? Like, you came in and implemented some pretty strong changes. You raised the minimum wage by 40%. The Walmart market cap fell by $20 billion as a result. Yeah. And I've heard you talking about the flight home after that from Wall Street.
Yeah.
your business has lost $20 billion and you're the guy. Like, what is that feeling like?
You got to be brave sometimes, don't you? And if you know it's the right thing to do, and you know you're going to be there for a while, then do the right thing. And it comes back to those sort of principles that I spoke about earlier that you got from your parents or your grandparents. You're here for a long time, not just a good time. So let's do what's right. And it wasn't all that difficult for me to do some of those things because I knew it was right. Doesn't mean that, you weren't uncomfortable. I can remember vividly the board meeting where actually we discussed moving the wages at the beginning. And I remember Walmart's 51% owned by the family. So, you have independent directors and you've got the family directors, but when you start fooling around with those sort of numbers, you're impacting the family first and foremost. And I can remember at that first board meeting where we had that discussion and, there was sort of silence around the table after I'd gone through a couple of PowerPoint slides and I went, I'm not sure how this is going to go. But one of the family members said, actually, do you want more? And I'll never forget that because I think that was exactly the right question. And I said, I actually don't need any more, but thank you. If you could give me that, you have my 100% commitment that I will now deliver for you. But yeah, it's tough when you're going home on the plane and you know that, it's not going to be a bonus and you've stripped a whole lot of value out of the company. But boy, it was the right thing to do. You couldn't attract people. I said before 1.5 million staff and I'm losing 600,000 a year. I can't recruit them as fast as I'm losing them. It's a pretty simple thing to do when you think about it, is pay people a decent amount, give them the tools to do their job, let them win. And if they do that, then they'll stick around.
And you won as a result, right? I think you did 300 billion in revenue soon after, which was 100 billion more than the New Zealand GDP at the time. Like, it's just
the sales go up. Yeah. People are happier. Customers, most importantly, get a better experience. They come back to the stores. They buy more. So the loop starts working again.
In episode 238, we were honoured to sit with Bill Bailey, one of the UK's biggest comedians and biggest international stars we've had on the show. We spoke about Bill's friendship and relationship with the late Sean Lock, and this is a snippet which talks about the amazing friendship they shared together.
Well, that's it. I mean, it was. I mean, actually, I've often thought about filming that as a drama, just that whole year, because we'd written this show, myself and Sean Lock, about a sort of down at heel rock star whose fortunes have taken a bit of a dive, and he wants to try and make a comeback. And he's kind of out of time. He's like one of these old sort of 80s rockers, and music's moved on, and these audiences moved on, and he's got his faithful roadie who's stuck with him throughout thick and thin. And so they put this show together, and it's about reminiscences of the crazy times and some songs, and of course the songs are all these bloated prog rock song nonsense, and we thought it was funny, obviously, because we thought it was great, and but it wasn't a sort of obvious stand-up show. It wasn't like like a lot of shows in the festival in Edinburgh are a lot with comics. There'll be a bill. There'll be like a mixed bill of comics, and it's pretty standard for audiences to sort of figure out what this is. But nobody knew what this was, and we probably didn't sell it very well. And anyway, you're right. We'd struggled to get an audience, and one night I remember Sean was the roadie, and he would go out before I would be backstage, and I was a West Country rocker, Bill Best, and I would be like, we'd have this conversation, and he'd go, right, he goes, okay, he goes, and a bit of health and safety. So he did a bit of banter with the audience. He go, right, health and safety. He goes, right, come at me, and I'll stop you. I've got all the skills, come at me. And then he would do this thing, and he goes, right, it's safe, Bill, you can come out now. And then one was, I was sat backstage, and I heard Sean, he went out and he went, right. He goes, okay, everyone. He goes, come, health and sit. Oh. Fuck's sake. And then he went, you can come out, Bill. And I thought he was in character. So I'm in backstage going, what's that, Big Sean? What, come out now? No, Bill. No, it's just Sean. It's Sean talking now. Just come out. And he goes, what do you mean come out now? You want me to come out? And there was a bit of that. And he goes, no, just fucking come out. He goes, there's no one here. There's no one here. And I sort of went, what? And so I sort of sheepishly came out and went, what do you mean, Big Sean? There's no. And then I looked out and there was no one. I went, oh, I see what you mean. And then it was only then we noticed there was one person in the audience. Oh, and it was a friend of ours, a comedian called Dominic Holland. Fun fact, his son is Tom Holland of Spider-Man fame. Anyway, so Dom, he's there and so we both clock him because he's right at the back because that's where Sean hadn't seen him in the first instance. And we just stood there looking at each other like, oh, for God's sake. And then Dominic went, he goes, go on, lads. He goes, just relax, lads. Enjoy yourselves. And we were like, Dom, we are not doing the show for you. That's just weird. I said, we'll take you to the bar and run you through the highlights, but we're not going to stand here and do the show. Anyway, it was actually one of the shows we were really, really down because obviously we'd put a lot of effort into this. I had a trolley made for this show. I had a Rockstar stretch trolley made. Like because when he goes to the shops, he can't have a normal trolley. He has to have a Rockstar shopping trolley, which had an aerial and it smoked glass. I mean, it was an amazing piece of kit, this prop. We had a friend of ours who cut two trolleys together and soldered them together into a long 6-foot shopping trolley. It was a thing of wonder. Anyway, we were really down. We were no audiences, a handful, a few. We were struggling away. And then we got this review, which was the most fantastic review I think we've ever had. It was just absolutely glowing. It was from one of the big papers. I can't remember what it was, but it said, "This is I've never laughed so much. This is the funniest show. You have to go and see it." And then we started to get an audience, and then it started to make sense. And I think of that very, very fondly. It was one of my fondest moments was hanging out with Sean that year when we were doing that show, and we threw everything into that, and it was really, really funny. When we wrote a song together called "The Leg of Time," which came out of that show, and it was really what the whole spirit of that time was about.
I did one of those lists. I turned 40 this year. I did one of those 40 things I've learned at 40. And one of them was Sean Locke may have been the funniest man to have ever lived. And I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit more about, best friends with him for so long. Like, what was it about the way he saw the world, or what was it that made him so brilliant in your eyes?
I think that he had this ability to just turn a story on its head, take a subject and go. You'd sort of go with him. Where the hell are we going with this? And then he would sort of flip it around and turn it into something else completely unexpected. And he had a kind of manic energy which he invested in every one of these routines, which drew you along. You in spite of yourself, you got carried along with this mad. Where's he going with what? Where's he going with this? Oh well, we're in. I'm in for it, And I saw him take audiences with him on these mad journeys. He did this. He used to do this routine. He said, "Have you ever had the problem with the cheap forks?" Right, straight away, everyone's going, "What? What do you mean? What do you mean the cheap forks?" He goes, the cheap forks. Have you had the problem with the cheap forks from Poland? The cheap Polish forks. Everyone's going, what are you talking about? And he goes, He goes, when you're making love with someone from behind, they're a bit sweaty and you can't get a grip on them, you just stick 2 forks in. But the cheap ones, they just bend, and everyone's going, "What? What?" And then he would just be off on some other tangent. And and when I first saw Sean, we were both on the same bill, and we just hit it off straight away, and that was it. We were friends from that night onwards, and we would. I think he was a brilliant writer as well. He wrote this wonderful sitcom, 15 Stories High, which tragically was he only made 2 series, and I think Sean was really quite sort of he was sort of quite taken aback when it didn't continue, because he really thought that was it. That was his the kind of where he wanted to be. He wanted to write comedy. That was his real aim. And when that didn't work out, I think it really did sort of, knock him back a little bit. And then he found this amazing gig in 15 Countdown, Cat Says Countdown, where he was able to really shine as a brilliant comic. And that's what sort of cemented his relationship with the public, I think. But really, that was those early days when we were knocked around in a car together, going up and down the country, doing gigs, thinking up mad ideas, was some of my fondest memories, not just of hanging out with Sean, but just of those early days of learning the business of comedy.
I imagine, there's so much to miss about him, but one part which I think might be unique is that it must be hard to find people whose opinion you trust when you're trying out new ideas or writing new bits. But I imagine that he would be like such a great sounding board, right?
Yeah, totally, absolutely, he was. And it's difficult. You're right. You want to find a trusted confidant with comedy, because it's sometimes quite personal. It's quite you feel a bit self-conscious about it sometimes. You feel a bit vulnerable. Like, is it people going to find? Are they going to like it? Well, they're not going to like it. My wife's quite a very good critic. She's very, very harsh, which is great. And my son's actually, he loves comedy as well, so he's very good. But with Sean, it's like, if you do it, if you're a comic, only comics understand certain things, because you have these mad thoughts as comics, and sometimes they strike you at odd times of the day. Like I'll be on tour, and I'd be in a hotel room on my own somewhere, just some weird travelogue. You know what I mean? Like go through the mini bar and just like on my own in a hotel room, just in my own head, in my own thoughts, going, "What am I doing with my life? I've just told a lot of nonsense to some strangers. Is this what life is? And now I'm on my own." Like, what? And I've just told them about the fact that I had a concrete pig once in my in my garden, and that's one of the perks of the job, and no one understands that kind of the madness, this sort of weird thought spiral you go down, except other comics, especially when somebody that you're very close to. And so I knew that I could always phone him and tell him those thoughts, even if it was like 2 a.m. And I'd say, "I'm having these mad thoughts," and he'd say, "Look, I know exactly. I've had the mad thoughts. Doesn't matter. We all have it. It's fine." And that was an enormous amount of comfort, having that person on the end of the phone, someone who's been there, gone through it, knows what the way that a comic's mind works.
In episode 203, we talked to Dr. Alia Bojilova about how her and her colleagues were held hostage in 2013 and how they managed to negotiate their release using the skills she'd developed in the SAS.
You know that scene in Taken? Have you seen the movie Taken?
I haven't seen it. Should I see it?
It's a good movie, but it might be triggering. But the guy's daughter basically is about to be abducted, and he's on the phone.
Oh yes, I have seen it.
Yeah, and he's like, "Describe everything for me that you see. Like, you're going to be taken in a minute. Describe everything that you see." But is it as quick as that you're having to do all these assessments while this stuff is happening?
Yeah, I think so.
Man,
is this the line of "You don't know me"?
Well, yeah. Well, I also
I
wrote that down because There's a weird dynamic in there where in the back of your mind, you do know someone who has a very particular set of skills in your immediate network. And again, I'm borrowing from the movie of you two in the Force falling in love, but did any part of your brain go, Jamie's going to black ops here and come in and surgically remove us?
I think he would have been desperate to do it. And you know, like when we came back months later, like in New Zealand, the first response I got, it was a random thing that we did. We went back to the team in camp, the SAS team, and every man and his dog that came to see me was like, I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous.
I wondered that.
You know, it's crazy, right?
Well, yes, it is. Especially as we're going to get you back into the story where you've just been taken.
Yeah. I mean, do you know, okay, in all fairness, I had every faith that my husband, if he had to become involved, would wait for the right time. And that's just way, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was having a snooze, getting ready for another day of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu the next day. Yeah. But there was a moment in time where I actually thought, shit, is he going to criticize my drill? You know, is he going to think that, like, am I conducting myself in the ultimate way possible? Because I don't want that guy to be nagging me or not getting
have something
I gotta
over
be
me.
the dude here, you know?
But I was wondering, do you train for that situation?
Yeah, we do. I mean, conduct after capture is something that you have to have. Weirdly, I actually thought that this was a training exercise, maybe because I'm just an optimistic energizer bunny, maybe because I was half asleep. But initial stages of it looked like a training exercise. And one of the things that probably stopped me from freaking out too early was actually going, are the UN going to run that scale of a training exercise? That's complicated. That's proper. You know, but we had just been in Australia running this just before I deployed, this enormous course that is specifically designed for UN observers going into high-risk zones, right? And a big chunk of it was being snatched, being taken. And you could see relatively quickly that the game is on, but all it takes is one person to react in a way that is triggering or that shows that they're experiencing fear for the whole stack of cards to fall apart. And you're like, this is a bit real, you know? So... yeah, so I actually did think it was a training exercise for a minute.
Is your two colleagues and you are taken to a second location? Are you sort of outranking them? Like, is it your responsibility to make them calm? And how are you communicating, if you can at all?
I think, yeah. So two things. It was my responsibility. That was my OP at the time. But we were all, in fact, one of our military observers that we had there, who was the most junior in terms of experience, was the most senior in terms of rank. You know, he was a lieutenant colonel. And so, yeah, how we communicated was indirectly. Like, you hear each other in each other's tone, because there were so many things going on. And you got to think about, Miko was still trying to make a mayday call and communicate what was going on, which is how we were hearing about alternative causes of actions that could be taken on our behalf. Can I double click on this one? We had very low confidence that alternative causes of actions that could be taken to save us were going to pan out in any way. I think what we were mindful that the stuff we were hearing as suggestions was just there to give us a little sprinkle of hope. And the reason for it is that months prior, when we were stuck in that border with Jordan, the 38 hours that we had in a bunker, the whole way through, we had some high-flying UN people talking to us about a diplomatic corridor being created for us from New York. New York was apparently up and at it, trying to create a diplomatic corridor. I'm like, how do you know, there's two rebels on two different checkpoints that don't have direct access to you. How are you going to what are you going to do? How are you going to speak to them? And we were freed only because a random soldier from a nearby mission had gone in, had a wonderful moment, a coffee sharing moment with one of the rebels months prior, rocked up in the middle of the day and went, hey, dude, can you just give us a window? Can you just give us 10 minutes window? Can you speak to your mate on the other checkpoint and open up a window for us? So we kept making jokes that diplomatic corridor is usually a dude that decides to share a cup of coffee with another dude. Yeah. and that's your way to life.
Human connection.
Human connection. It's gold. Do you know what I mean? Gold. So in that particular incident, when we were taken hostage, we had this Miko contemplating and discussing and processing all the stuff that was coming back from HQ, from headquarters for us. I was trying to talk to the people who were wanting to break into our building. And our third military observer was none the wiser. At the time, he was asleep in a bunker on the side of our main building, and the bunker was soundproof. So he had no idea. He had absolutely no clue what was going on.
So are there just 3 of you in the whole of the OP, you call it?
Yeah, observation post.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I was thinking there was like a whole force of people and just you 3 were targeted, but it was just you 3
Just
there.
us.
Right.
Yeah.
So the detail sort of the next step is I don't know, after 8 the whole thing lasts about 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so once they take you to the new place and you're in this new environment, what's happening? What's going through your head? Are you just trying to I understand that you talked a lot and you asked a lot of questions, and it was perhaps your curiosity which in the end helped get you out of there.
Yeah, that was an epiphany we had some months later, you know. What happened is we had a few wins along the way. So, for example, when we were being taken, when we were extracted out of the OP, we got dragged through minefields, and we were saying, Miko and I were saying, man, this is a bad idea. I was trying to tell the rebels, no go, boom, boom, boom. They understood perfectly well what this was all about, but they knew the path. And Miko turned to me and said, hey, dude, we're doing it for real. Now, earlier that day, Miko and I had been training on this 2x2 platform, concrete platform, doing, burpees and everything one must do if you're bored. And we were playing this track by The Prodigy that has, we walk through the minefields. And by that stage, we had a few kind of indications that this was not going to be easy. We've had a few little moments of, forceful nudges along the way. But this one moment was a steal. And so Miko gave us this moment of hope. So we giggled for a hot second. And then we knew that the reaction that our team gave us, some of them were prepared to listen. Some of them were kind of curious to hear what this was all about. I noticed that one of the people that helped me, he smelled like cigarettes. And so I said to him, can I have a cigarette? Have heard from some 1960s book in Conduct After Capture that if your captors give you a moment of grace, you have higher probability of survival. And so we're walking through these minefields. Miko was talking about The Prodigy. I'm smoking a cigarette that was just disgusting. And so by the time when we were in what was supposed to be our first holding area, we had a few little wins. Do you know what I mean? Like we knew that we weren't going to, it was a kind of a malleable space. If you'd imagine, if you're in training exercises in the past, particularly when you are practicing conduct after capture situation in trained military forces, there is no wiggle room. It is a hard front. You hear your mission. If you disobey an order, you know about it. But there were a few little, wrinkles on that fabric.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, man.
That you're being taken by this organization who there's a low chance of you surviving it. Beheading is part of their arsenal. You're getting dragged across a minefield, but you managed to frame it in a positive light and have a giggle.
I know.
That's just remarkable.
I mean, it was funny though.
Yeah. I don't know how to react in the
what are the
retelling of some of
chances?
this stuff.
Seriously.
Yeah.
It is a bit funny. And do you know what actually got us there? This is the thing. Like, if you just make a little tiny space for laughter, anything is better, right? But the thing that actually got us there is what a bunch of clowns, right? So we were walking through the minefields, and like it's kind of clear. We didn't know if this was an inshallah moment, like if we die, we die. But, some of the rebels in front of us were trying to point which way to go, like where were the no mines. I'm like, well, these mines are so volatile and so old that they shift. So you might have a marking on it. But, it shifts with weather and everything else. So they were bouncing around across the mines. We screwed. But Miko and I were doing this. And again, we looked at ourselves and we were both going, ugh. And it's like
wincing as if
just
any moment.
We were thinking, what are you going to do? You protect your dentures? Like, what it's like the first reaction you have is like, you're going to have to maybe think that this is a significant boom and it's not going to it's not going to make much difference. What? Like, how ridiculous is that?
Yeah.
So you get this moment and then it was Miko's like little trying to spice things up by saying, we're doing it for real, because we'd replayed that song a million times, trying to do the maximum amount of burpees on the Golan Heights. Just the irony is, you can't miss that moment, can you?
What a whirlwind.
know,
So
sorry.
link us up to when you got an initial sense that you might get released and how that came about, like what was happening in the hours before.
I mean, I don't think we were confident that we were free until we were in the OP. Like, that is the creepiest feeling of all, right? And so we were in the building, and there were so many random moments in that building. Can I just share a couple, just so that we can understand how unique different human experiences can be? Because that was the stuff that was stacking up in my mind. We were held in a living room, and the village is called Bir Ajam, right, in Syria. And so that village had particular ethnic group in it that clearly loved color and vibrancy. And so you walk in, and the village had been abandoned for some time. But the first stuff you notice is that there were like different age group shoes at the front, dusted, because that's the area that has been pammeled on for a while, dusty and messy. There were still pictures on the wall of family members. If you look at, those little coffee cabinets that you have, old coffee cabinets with glass on it, you could see that there were precious china pieces in it. The whole thing looked surreal. I guess if you were taken in a barn space, you don't have the visual cue to make sense of stuff or to keep yourself entertained and start making sense of it. But this was like haunted and ghastly, like, because you're thinking, I remember thinking genuinely at the time, I was like, shit, did they leave alive? Did they walk out voluntarily? Where are they? And so that's to appreciate that much of what was in this house was probably accumulated in the course of generations, and all that was left behind was everything. It was a lot. So we were held there. We had few really, really kind of prickly moments where we realized that in different stages, we could hear people debating and arguing, sometimes in heated discussions with one another. We weren't sure if they're trying to work out where to ship us to. We struck the conversation with a couple of our security forces who were 13-year-olds, no kidding, and they were holding the, AK-47, the weapon, in the most dangerous way. You know what I mean? Like in a way that would hurt them before it causes any harm. So, I remember Miku just looking me sideways because I was trying to correct how they hold the weapon so that they don't injure themselves. It's like, you don't want to be responsible for a kid, shooting themselves in the foot. But we started a conversation around a photo. So one of our captors who spoke okay English stepped in at one point. We don't know what had triggered him, but he was pissed off. He was angry. And he came in and he showed us a picture in his wallet saying, they're all dead. They're all dead. And it was family. And they must have been having discussion about how useless we are, or how to make sense, or how to take full advantage of us. And I said to him, I'm really sorry, that is devastating. Miko also has a wife and a child at home. We feel your pain, and that could have just gone every which way, but it's what felt true in the moment. And so one conversation led to another. We found out that one of our captors had just was on track to finish his PhD in physics in Damascus University before the war started. That they looked like they'd been scooped up from left, right, and center, and they had nothing else to do. And so we were released soon after. We were shown the word humility in an English-Arabic dictionary, which we have no idea why. We don't know if they meant the right word, or we don't know if we showed it or they're showing it to us. But also having secured for them audience with the UN general who was responsible for the region at the time. So they had my radio, and they allowed me to radio back to headquarters and tell my headquarters that we are alive and well and okay. And funny, can I just... Our boss was in Israel at the time, so radioed us to headquarters. And I said to him, sir, we are good, we are okay, we are alive. And he was saying on the radio, are you really, really okay? Are you really, really okay? I'm like, what do I say? I mean, like, if you have people pointing guns at you, what are you going to say anyway?
Yeah. That doesn't sound like protocol.
It wasn't a very protocol thing, but I think the whole thing was out of protocol.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we were not supposed to be there. It was, we had them worried, majorly worried. You know what I mean?
Is it
Yeah.
my understanding right? You kind of don't really know why they released you. Like you can guess and you can think it was humility and maybe it was like the way you were talking to them or all these little things, but you don't know. But you just did everything right that you could.
I think so. I mean, I think we were a very precious target. You know, you don't. It doesn't get any better than 3 UN observers from 3 different countries. It just, if you want to make a point, it's perfect posy for that. You know, I don't think we did anything particularly magnificent. Maybe there was always the hope that if we played our cards right, and they played their cards right, they would secure that audience with the general, because the ultimate goal is to discuss why they haven't received the support that had been promised to them in terms of weapons systems and food, and which is fair point. It's what UN should have been doing. Maybe the fact that they had guaranteed, and this is the thing, when we were released, we will walk back the same way we came in. Rebels started peeling off behind us, and we were thinking, is this the end, or is this the beginning of something?
Shit.
I know.
Yeah, right, of course. You don't, holy shit, I didn't
None
think
of it makes
that.
sense.
No. But it's also through the minefield again.
Yeah.
Right? And so
That good old chestnut.
Yeah. And so, okay,
Yeah.
so they start fading away, and then eventually you get what happens when you get through that door or to the other side. Are you hugging? Are you emotional?
No, because we had the UN general was there with his entire convoy, and we needed to see them on top of the hill for us to walk back up. And so it was a really weird thing. So we knew that the whole convoy is there. They're already waiting for our arrival. I was walking up. The guys were laughing at me because I said, that's enough now. That's enough, out loud, which is just, I was thinking in my mind, I was like, I don't need any more adventure. I'm good. And so we had everybody was there. So we knew that hopefully they're not going to make a final stint with us and showcase brutality in the last moment. But then they pulled out, there's so many random moments. They pulled out a camera just before they handed us over, a video camera. And as the I don't know, accidental lead of this entire scenario, they said to me, you need to tell the camera that we treated you really well and we were very kind. I needed to tell that to the camera. And then you have this, like in the sleep-deprived brain, all these rule books about what are you supposed to say on a camera when someone asks you. I'm like, my cup of coffee is there. I just want to have a coffee.
Yeah,
So that was until the last minute. We weren't quite sure what the whole ordeal was about, whether this was the end, or was that the beginning of something enormous.
In episode 223, we talked to one of New Zealand's most successful businessmen and investors, Rowan Simpson, about how close his business success was to failure and that there's only 3 ways to be wrong. You were employee number 3 at TradeMe, the first non-Morgan, and you were involved in the $750 million sale to Fairfax. You were head of product and an early investor in Xero before becoming an investor and director in software firms Timely and Vend, which sold for $135 million and $455 million respectively. But the book is called How to Be Wrong, and it feels to me like you got a lot right. But you spend the first chapter talking about how all of those businesses came so close to collapsing. And I feel like in this, that's kind of the most interesting part to attack. It's like, yes, you've got the success from the outside, but how close things were to not working out.
I had this opportunity to work on all of those companies and others as well, which have been successful, and we wrap so much mythology around success, and definitely for those sorts of companies, but I think in general. So when I thought about the book, I was determined to start with those near-death moments, because I agree with you, they are the most interesting bit of the story, and especially for people who are working on their own things, because it's easy from the outside to look at successes like that and imagine them to be like these smooth rides, and then compare that to your own experience, which is typically a series of disasters, and think that you're doing something wrong, when actually every success is like that. And so I think hopefully that's a much more useful kind of way of describing these stories than just focusing on the bits we got right. The other thing I would say is like that whole mindset of being wrong, kind of being uncertain, being a little bit fearful, being anxious in terms of launching too late and being a bit embarrassed. Like those are actually the traits and the behaviors that get you there. Like if you start out thinking that you're the king of the world and that then that doesn't often work.
And the romantic notion, or the parts that are often spoken about, are we started with nothing. And then we sold it for this, and it's all the stuff in the middle is like the really interesting part, but nobody ever seems to talk about it.
Nah, it's weird, eh? We get these little snapshots of these companies in terms of what they say out loud in the media or whatever, and yeah, it's like often you'll see one story, it's like, we just raised some capital from some investors, and then like a few years later we sold the company. It's like, wow, just like there's this montage and you missed all the interesting bits.
So from reading the book, there are 3 ways that you've listed to be wrong, right? What can you?
Only 3 ways.
Only 3 ways.
Only 3
ways. Can you tell us that?
Yeah. So the first way to be wrong is to not ask. So like just don't even measure. Don't inquire as to your results, which sounds kind of silly, but actually this is very, very common. Lots of people don't actually create a feedback loop. The second way is to not know, so to make a mistake, which is kind of quite human. Like, we're all constantly making mistakes, but when you are kind of measuring, trying to work out whether things are working, trying to deeply understand, there's all sorts of biases and things that can come in there. So to just give one example to sort of flesh that out, you guys have got a new business. The first handful of customers that you have in that business are probably not likely super representative of the customers that you have eventually. So you need to be a little bit careful about that. So that's don't know. And then the third one is don't tell. It's like just lie, which is to like know that you're wrong, but pretend that you're not. And again, that sounds silly. It sounds like it would be easy to avoid doing that, but especially in startups, it's like very, very common because we're sort of encouraged to fake it till you make it often, which is lying.
That was described to me by one of your sources as bluffing. Is that kind of another way that you use it in your own rhetoric?
I suppose so, yeah. I mean, that's just another variation of the same behavior, right? Which is just not being honest with yourself, and as a result, not being honest with others. But with yourself, most importantly, like if you know that something's not working, but you don't address that, then that's being wrong, and that gets you eventually.
Yeah, this is real timely episode.
You say like there's only 3 ways to be wrong. Is this like a Rowan Simpson original, or is this like widely accepted?
Oh no, I haven't. I think I came up with that. It's from a really old blog post. That's what I
wanted to know. Like, how long ago did you arrive at like this? This is really clear and simple, like easy for me to understand. There's 3 ways.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, I think it's from like 2010 or 2012, so it's like properly old.
Yeah, stood the test of time.
I think I started off writing a post called "How to Be Right," and realized that actually what I was describing is like these are the things you need to not do. So like don't pretend that you can get away just living on belief. Like actually measure your results. Like don't fall into all of these common traps that people fall into. Like and most of all, just don't lie. Like be honest with yourself first and foremost, or have other people who will force you to account a little bit. And then I realized I can't think of any other ways. So I've been saying this for years. Maybe there's a 4th way, but no one's come up with it yet.
In episode 240, we talked to Geoff Ross. Geoff is the guy that built 42 Below from his garage to a $138 million sale to Bacardi, and he's a marketing genius. In this one, we talked about his 11 rules of marketing. And if you're in business or building a brand, take notes because this is gold.
One of the real keys to the success is marketing, and one of my favorite chapters in the book was it's called I Hate Marketing, and I want to read the 11 sort of bullet points that you've written, and then we can sort of talk about some of the ones you think are most important. So, number 1, culture leads everything. Your culture needs to know what its fight is. 2, brands need real roots and real credentials. 3, listen to everyone, but be prepared to ignore what you don't like. 4, at all costs get noticed, be heard, stand for something. 5, word of mouth is the most powerful medium in the world. 6, PR builds brands, advertising maintains them. 7, sales is marketing, marketing is sales. 8, the power of opposites, anti-cyclical thinking. 9, pitch it high, sell it wide. Positioning is different from distribution. 10, brands have stretch. 11, ready, fire, aim. Which one stands out when I read those back to you? Are there any that jump out to you as more important than others?
Goodness, I haven't read that list for a long time. I think now I wish I had read it more recently. I think it's still a pretty good list, actually. I can't see one there that really stands out.
What does brands have stretch mean?
Okay, brand managers get far too precious with their brand. Often they think, we can only kind of talk about it in this way, we can only price it in this way, we can only package it in this way. They put it in a straitjacket. Brands actually are like people. They can be far more flexible than that.
Okay, let's ask all about all of these, because I think you're going to have good answers for each of them.
Can I start with one? Because when 42 Below was coming out, that was when I was first coming into my drinking years, my real drinking years, when I was legal. And I just remember it being everywhere, which I think links to point 4, at all costs get noticed, be heard, stand for something. Like, from my recollection of it was 42 Below was everywhere, and marketing stunts, and is that what you were talking about? Is just making noise?
That was definitely part of it, and thankfully I had a great mate from advertising called Daryl Parsons, who's a genius at that. But no, it's a lot more than that. Like, brands need substance and noise, and they need roots, credentials, a reason for being. If we were just a noisy maverick brand, which we were a maverick brand, but without a real story, without good quality, without a reason for being, I don't think we would have succeeded.
Culture leads everything. Your culture needs to know what its fight is.
Yeah. I think a common fight is actually really galvanizing and puts everyone in the same direction. We were tiny, and we were facing brands like Absolute or big distribution groups like Lion, and if we ever got a small win, I remember the day we got Soul Bar actually here in the viaduct. I think it was a Finlandia or an Absolute account, and we just could not get in, But somehow we got one bottle in there, and the sales guy came back and said, "Hey, Soul just bought a bottle," and we just that had very little consequence to the business really, but we viewed that as belief. That was a signal that we could take on Absolute and win, and so we kind of celebrated those.
I've got Wolf of Wall Street vibes in my mind about the celebrations in the office and what those look like, but maybe that's off.
No, we did. Well, a woman worked with us called Anna, had a pet sheep called Monty, and somehow whenever we got a win like that, we called a Monty, which was everyone having a shot, and as we started growing around the world, someone would get a win in London that was 9 o'clock in the morning in New Zealand, so we'd all have a Monty, and what that did to our culture is not only did it help belief, but it made you want to be the one who called the Monty. You wanted to get back to that office and say, "I just got this," we're calling a Monty. So it was good. It was a good little signal.
Listen to everyone, but be prepared to ignore what you don't like. I find this interesting.
Yeah, so there's a fine line between arrogance, and belief as well. So you should never be arrogant. You've got to listen to everybody. But you do have to realize that some people don't have the vision. They don't lie awake at night that you do. They haven't seen all the things that you've seen in your mind. So they might advise you differently because you haven't, they're not seeing all the kind of opportunities and signals that you're seeing. So by all means, listen. We should always listen. But at the end of the day, kind of believe in what your gut's telling you.
This one I can speak to because it's how the podcast has grown. Word of mouth is the most powerful medium, and nothing is more powerful than a friend or someone whose opinion you trust recommending something, right?
100%, yeah. There's a saying from advertising, a brand's not a brand until you've experienced it, like 7 times for some reason. You may have seen it in a magazine, you may have heard about it in a shop. A dealer in a showroom may have talked about it, a friend may have talked about it. But the biggest component of that is word of mouth by all means.
Is that where those viral, we'd call them viral videos now, but this was pre-YouTube. This is when you were attaching videos to emails and forwarding them to people, and they were forwarding them on?
MPEGs.
Yeah.
MPEGs. Daryl was a genius at these. We created a little MPEG. Actually, they started as radio ads. We got some free radio time somehow. I don't know how. So Daryl wrote some radio ads. And then a week later, he said, I think we can put some images to these. And made an MPEG. And we'd release them at night, before we left to go home, come back into work the following morning and see how many views they'd had. And sometimes it'd just be millions and millions the following morning.
So cool.
The power of opposites, anti-cyclical thinking.
Yeah, Karen Walker actually introduced this concept. She was on the 42 Below board, and she talked about it's so hard, to be fresh and to be new. So where do you go for fresh, innovative, interesting thinking that's going to cut through? A good place to start is actually thinking about the opposites. So in her world, if everyone's going, I don't know, into pinks or into florals or into pinstripes or whatever, what's the opposite of that? And that's often going to get you cut through and kind of a fresh audience.
Man, I'm sorry to relate it back to us again, but I remember we've been doing the podcast sort of 6 years, and I remember quite early, I got some advice that, everyone's doing sort of 30 or 40 minute podcast, it should be that sort of size because it's a more enjoyable experience for the listener. And I was like, no, I want to do our 2 hour ones.
2 hour 40, that's where it's at. That's where it's really at.
Yeah. Ready, fire, aim.
I think that's actually a Kevin Roberts-ism. There's so many brands that kind of try and perfect the business plan or perfect the comms plan, and they start tinkering with it, forever and ever and ever. And the truth is, there's never the perfect business plan, So I think we say in the book, marketing's like one of those missiles. Just get it in the air, and then you can direct it, But if it's on the ground and you're kind of tinkering with it for forever, it's never going to do any good, So I guess another way of saying just start. Yeah.
So these are good. Pitch it high, sell it wide. Positioning is different from distribution.
I think that's the Gucci analogy. They sell $10,000 dresses, they kind of put $10,000 dresses on the runway, but actually where they make all their money is in t-shirts and sunglasses. So it's build your brand. Mercedes are great at doing it. Build your brand way up here, even if though you're selling, four-door grey sedans, by mass. Down there, so it just helps keep your brand high.
And last one, I think, sales is marketing and marketing is sales.
Yeah, it's putting your brand on a shelf is a form of marketing. Selling is, you've got to have salespeople that get out there and put your brand on the shelf. That's doing a job for building the brand. And if brand builders are good, they should move product as well. It should create demand. So that. I know they're kind of different on the one hand, but they've got to work pretty well together.
I know you haven't heard these in a while, and I don't want to skip too far in the story, but are these just ingrained principles in you now? Like, you've rattled off what they mean to us as we've peppered them at you, but are they just part of your way of thinking?
I'm actually thinking they should be I haven't heard those for a long time. I think I need to revisit them. I think they're still pretty strong, actually, and still quite relevant.
In episode 228, we talked to Viv Conway and Joe Cummings from Girls Get Off. They built this epic sex toy business, and we talk about how a billboard prank and genius marketing helped launch the brand into what it is today.
You guys have been described to us as marketing geniuses, and I'm really keen to dig into the sort of strategy from those early days. Like, were you thinking, build this Insta account to as many followers as we can, and that is going to be our biggest gateway? Like, are you trying to drive people to the website? Like, in that first year, like, how did you approach it?
It changed so much from the strategy we had in our head, because we just came up against brick walls of people not wanting to work with us and no paid ads and restrictions here, restrictions there, like everything. So it was just a constantly changing thing.
I think we'd been doing some, and because, we realised, no influencers are going to want to work with us, we've got to be our own channel. We started to do fun things, like from the very beginning we had confessions, where every Sunday people write in what they've been up to over the weekend, and we anonymously post those. And so that's always been something that we've done for over 4 years. And so we've done little bits and pieces like that. But when New Zealand went into that second lockdown in 2022, I think it was September, I believe I had just landed in Queenstown for a holiday away, and it was an hour after I landed, they said, we're going into lockdown for 3 days. And I remember getting on the phone to Joe, and we went, right, this engagement is going to be huge. huge. All the other brands are going to take at least a couple of days to get onto this. Let's do a giveaway a day. So we started doing, and obviously that lockdown turned into like 10 days and a lot longer for poor Aucklanders, but we then did a giveaway a day. But on top of that, we realised, wait, we're doing, a little quiz once a week on our stories. Why are we not doing that every day? And I think that just turned into, probably working as many hours as we've ever worked before over that lockdown, but then realising that there's no reason you can't be putting out fun content on Instagram en masse. And so after that, that's when we really started to pump out content all the time rather than just, let's do something funny today, or I've made something on Canva. It became more of like a main strategy.
And again, even this is 4 years ago, and this is what blows my mind, because now all of that stuff is so normal, right? But back then it was fresh, and that was one of our values, to keep it fresh. And I think one thing that played in our favour is that we didn't have a marketing person. So, and we're not, we've got no degree or anything like that. We've been told no rules. And so it was just anything goes, and now for the last couple of years, so many brands have just anything goes, whereas back then there were rules in place that, marketing, you had to tick boxes and stuff, and we were just like, yeah, cool, we'll chuck a costume on and...
No brand guidelines. Yeah, having worked for brands where there were brand guidelines and things had to be signed off, say, for different clients that we had, we really just had no rules. And people liked that we were us, and they also, when you're talking about something that's as taboo as sex toys, if you can make someone laugh, it kind of helps shake away those uncomfortable feelings. And then that's when you get someone sharing a picture of a sex toy or a confession with a friend that otherwise never have a conversation about masturbation with, or with a partner, or reading them together. So that worked in our favour that way too, by just creating a reason for conversation.
That COVID recipe too, so perfect for you. Terrible time, but for you guys, people home alone for weeks
Masturbating
and
up a
months,
storm.
can't contact their sexual partners, sex toys come into their periphery, oh yeah, let's go, right?
Yeah. And the engagement on Instagram at the time was through the roof. We still haven't hit those numbers in stories, I don't think. Even though our audience is growing, wild.
Yeah, I think the first lockdown, I've got my dates wrong. First lockdown 2020 is when March 2020 when we came up with the idea. Took us a year to launch, March 2021, and then September 21 was that big break for us.
And you had some big stunts as well, like the billboard in Tauranga, I think it was, when lockdown opened up and the whole of Auckland kind of flooded down. Is that have I got that right?
Yeah, that was great. That was one of our best moments.
Yeah, well, because Auckland had to stay in that lockdown for 3-4 months. Excuse my ignorance for the Aucklanders listening, but we knew that they were going to be released. Half of them were coming to their beach houses in Mount Maunganui, and there was a billboard right above Sisters in the Mount, which we thought that would be such a good location to have. Aucklanders are coming, so can you, spelled C-U-M-I-N-G. But we weren't allowed that site because the landowner was too conservative or something, so they ended up saying, hold on, we've actually got an even better site. It's right on the state highway. And that day I've never seen traffic backed up like that before. And I actually think, having done quite a few billboards now, we've never done them to get an increase in sales, but that was the only time where we've actually had a little increase in sales from a billboard like that.
Yeah, that was traffic jammed on that highway for hours and hours and hours. And then I think one of the funniest things that came out of this is the complaints we got as well. So the ASA complaints, and they wrote to us, and we just pretended we didn't get it. It went to junk. And we figured we had a few days up our sleeves anyway. And then, they kept contacting us. So we asked to change the billboard. What was it?
Well, the following week was leading into Christmas, so we changed it to Santa is coming, so can you?
Oh, no. After the Aucklanders are coming one got all the complaints, we were like, we've got something to moan about. We'll give you something to moan about, Karen. Went into that one. And then so change that billboard to, we'll give you something to moan about.
Are you guys just workshopping this yourself?
Are you there's no marketing person?
No, it just happens. Yeah.
You just that's perfect. Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah, this was before ChatGPT as well. We were on fire.
It's so good though. It's so clean and clear and fun.
Again, no rules, hey? It was just like, and so you can just be creative as creative as what you want. Yeah.
And you start to get a bit of notoriety in a positive way, but you're invited onto like 7 Sharp and a bit of mainstream media as well. And then do you have to adjust even more to be subtle about how you are talking about your product and talking about the benefits?
Yeah, and that was such a win from them. Like, you know, so good that they were so keen to have us on that they came up with the narrative of we were selling sandwiches and, you know, like spoke about sandwiches. It was actually quite funny. My step grandma, I think she'd be called, her daughter actually messaged me after the 7 Sharp episode and she's like, Mum just said your sandwich business is looking really good. Like, so there was people that actually thought it was sandwiches.
Just missing the subtlety of the whole segment.
I think at the start of the segment, Lucas had said, all right, because this is a 7 p.m. family-friendly show, we're not going to say what they really sell. We're just going to say sandwiches. And then right at the end, we said we sell vibrators. But that was amazing for us because it helped us get in front of an audience that we don't normally get to interact with on Instagram. Like, we're so Instagram heavy, and then from that exposure, we had like one of the best emails we've ever had was from a lady. She said she was 78 and she'd heard about us from 7 Sharp. She'd lost her soulmate 5 years ago, but she'd really missed the big O, and so she was happy that she'd found our product Missy. She just couldn't wait for the look on her kids' faces when they found it in her bedside table after she passed. So that's just not the demographic we get on Instagram, but it's our favourite.
Yeah. Is there a lot of that market? Is that a lot of your market share into that older?
It peaked after that 7 Sharp episode. It 65 plus for 3 weeks.
Oh, that was actually after we got featured in Women's Day. We had a write-up in Women's Day, and for the next 3 weeks, 65 plus age demographic was bigger than any other demographic on our website. But same on after 7 Sharp. It was just, it's just, if we can get in front of that audience, then amazing.
Did that surprise you? Like, when you started out, did you think it would be for younger clients, and then did that older age group
surprised us?
Yeah.
It's been full of surprises, and that was one of them. Yeah.
I think because we had chosen Instagram as our main marketing stream, we just assumed we'd be targeting people, young women, single, who were looking for their first vibrator maybe, and that's why we chose something so non-intimidating. But we quickly found out that actually we resonate, and actually the people who buy the most from us are maybe 40, 50 plus in a relationship, want to spice things up, few young kids. And especially when we can get in front of people who are maybe 65 plus, they've really, if you're 25, you've got Instagram, TikTok, you probably have some exposure to sex and sex toys on your Instagram feed, especially now at least. But for that demographic who've really never had the conversation, it's just, again, it's starting that conversation around, wow, this actually doesn't have to be weird, it can be fun and you can be curious about it.
Yeah, I think also listening to people we're speaking to at the time as well. So, even going into it, we were thinking early 20s, like that was going to be our target audience, and we'd go out into town and people would be like, oh, girls get off. And all the younger 20s are like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to buy your product. I really want to buy your product. And then late 30s would be like, girls get off. Like, oh my gosh, I just bought one for all of my friends, and we're like, okay, you're our target audience, the ones that are actually spending money. Yeah. So it's.
In this game, it sort of feels like everyone's trying to build a community. And how did you go about doing that? I mean, you mentioned Instagram, but was there a Facebook group? Like, kind of everyone landed on a Facebook group at one point in time. But have you still got one? Is that still part of your strategy now?
Yeah, Girls Get Off Uncensored. And that's wild. It is such a good group, so supportive. It's a no bullshit kind of group. People just get blocked if they start any crap. And it's like a girls only, and they're just so open and supportive, and it's, such a great place to be. The one standout for me in the Facebook group was the girl that posted about her butt acne, and she was she was embarrassed that she's like, what do you guys do with, because I don't want to do doggy and stuff like this because I've got butt acne. And I'm like, how, like, it's just so great that you found a place that you could ask that, you know? So
What was the advice?
sure, it's all right.
The Facebook group, like, I mean, people can ask anonymous questions. I started laughing because you just reminded me of my favourite post of the Facebook group. You get everything in that group. You get everything from people who, you know, you read a post, and I've had to message friends who are social workers saying, right, what things do I need to copy and paste in the comment here because this person doesn't sound like they're in a great situation, all the way through to I'm staying at my parents' at the moment, so I'm going to have sex in the car. Does anyone have any suggested positions for a Suzuki Swift? But I think the best thing was, you know, not everyone has people in their life that they can ask these questions to, so the group means that they can get support or they can get unbiased support. But I think the time a girl had taken a picture of her vulva to check something out, but she'd accidentally uploaded it to Google Maps. It's probably one of the funniest ones. I'm approving the post going, I'm sure you've figured out how to take it down by now because it's been 24 hours. Oh, could you imagine?
Yeah. In episode 224, we talked to Reeve about the importance of more meaningful male friendships, and he introduced a new idea to us, which is the 6-second hug. Hitchcock was telling us about the 6-second hugs.
Yeah.
We wanted to ask you what that was.
Well, a 6-second hug, it's there's a combination of it. So there's once again, like, I love to read. Like, I love to learn shit, basically. And so there's a guy that we spoke to called TJ Power. And he's written this book called The Dose Effect, which is an acronym for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And so he is a neuroscientist and a man very much after my own heart, like a rat bag, and he was wondering why he did the things that he did. There's thousands, tens of thousands of years of your brain being developed a certain way. Like, whether or not we want to acknowledge it, at some stage we'll be able to trace ourselves back to some hairy fuck in a cave, you know, like.
No, don't look at me. It's over here. You fingered the wrong man.
Yeah. So there'd be someone in a cave that we were related to that was clubbing a fucking woolly mammoth and building a fire. And so dopamine sort of fires up in your body. And the first thing you get up in the morning, and building that fire, you know, sort of really raises it up, and then you head out as a group to go and slay an animal to bring it back to feed the family, and that's the oxytocin part where you share in a collective challenge with people, and it brings you closer together. So if I look you dead in the eyes for 15 seconds, we start building oxytocin within our body, which is me telling you that we're okay. And as lads, this is a little bit tricky because also part of that programming is that we look at each other like that. You're going, you're sizing me up to either fuck me or fight me here. So both. And so the 6-second hug is a way of building oxytocin and connecting with people. So if you just bring it in, you hug to a certain extent, handshake, whatever it is, fist bump, that's one thing. It does build it up. But a 6-second hug moves it past that real base level and really starts to build connection, like a chemical connection between two people. Your body goes, well, this person's holding me long enough. And that's why we do those things with our kids. Like, we hold our kids because that's how you build connection with your kids. It's the oxytocin, which is what makes them go, oh, you're actually all right. You're here to look after me. You're not, you don't have any ill thoughts towards me. And that's why our kids generally look like us. The first ones look like us as dads. So you don't go, which fucking caveman's been coming on. That's the general sort of connection with the kids. So he did a great job of explaining it in layman's terms. And so when we hug in this, in the AA setting, there's the Aboriginal Indigenous people of Australia, First Nations people of Australia. They hug with, you know how we normally hug with our heads to the left, I guess?
Touching hearts.
Yeah. So they put their hearts together because that's the most important organ within the body, and that's their way of showing that they trust you. And so when you're crossing through their lands, there's 440 different, like dialect tribes within Australia when European settlers first turned up, and they didn't fucking speak a lick of the same language. Like, they would communicate and they would set their intentions, and I need to pass through your land, and I'm not doing anything, not doing anything untowards, because it's just fucking eye for an eye back then. Like, you fucked up, like, they just go and wipe you out. Like, they didn't fuck around, but they were really loving people, and that was something that was developed. And they're the oldest living population in the world, and that's how they've done it. So I think it was something special about that as well. So
Are you just doing it with close friends, or is it everyone?
No, that's kind of the close friend one. Yeah,
Okay.
So those lads are the ones that you kind of it's almost like a reserved, you know. Like,
I like it.
This is how you show that. This is how I'm showing you that I care about you.
Yeah.
So if we come in and out of habit, you go the other way. These boys, and back it up and go on again.
Yeah.
I've heard that. And I've got that in my locker. I realised that as well. There's only certain people that you kind of you do pull that out with that know.
Yeah.
It's
it's
interesting one.
So we all go by Blee because Blee's brother in Balinese.
Episode 234 was a really cool one. We sat with celebrity chef and Kiwi icon Al Brown, and this was a chat with so much depth. He spoke to us about finding his identity through his adoption journey and what it meant to have a relationship with his biological parents.
I don't know where we start with this, but I feel like I have a little, and it goes right back to being adopted, and I feel like I carry this little person around in me, or this voice that's just waiting, and then it comes out in a moment, and often again over very, very small things, and it's a trigger, and it's kind of like, told you, it's sort of like that in your ear, you can't do it, and that's always been something that and I've been in therapy for about 10 years, I guess, which I thought I was going along for I'll go and see someone out a couple of weeks. I'll put that in my diary. I'll be sweet after that, and here I still am trying to work it out.
Al, if it's okay with you, we are keen to sort of dig around on this, because I know identity is important to you, and I'm hoping you could take us back to the start of your upbringing and tell us a little bit about your family dynamic and how it shaped you. I was adopted, and both my sisters were adopted as well, and my father, I guess my parents adopted until they got a boy, because my father had a farm and wanted a son to take over the farm. I came along and I was, a pretty sensitive little kid, and wasn't really fit for purpose and certainly in my father's eyes. And I was, was scared of my father all my life, and I used to hide when I saw him coming, those sorts of things, and so I guess I built some. I remember a very pivotal moment when I was being dressed down by my parents on a holiday, and I think I was about 8 or 7 or 8, something like that. I remember that being a very pivotal moment in a sense of I'm on my own here, and it goes back a little bit further. And I found my parents, and that's and I've met them, and there's more to it than that. But I through therapy, I realised that those 4 days of when I was born, before I was picked up, my mother, who gave birth to me, Gail, who's still alive in Australia, I needed to know relatively recently, like, what actually really happened in those 4 days. So this is the pre-verbal stage, and so I was born. She held me for 15 minutes, and then I was taken away for 2 days, and then I don't know why, but I was brought back to her for another half day, and then as it's kind of like, this is your last, and then my parents who brought me up, picked me up and took me, and I wonder, and I just know that the trauma that happens around that, if you've been carried by someone, the smell, the noise, all that sort of thing, and not being able to understand what is going on, and lots of people have really amazing adoptions, and it works out really, really well, but it didn't so much for me, in a sense that, it's not a wonder I didn't bond with my parents if I'm just going, where the fuck's my mother? And not being able to
express that, but in your mind going, what's going on here? So I don't think that, and I'm not saying that, I'm sure they tried hard to bond with me, but if I'm not giving anything back to them but screaming and going, strangers, or you can understand maybe, well, they didn't bond with me either. So I think it started right back then, and then understanding that I felt like I wasn't good enough and I wasn't fit for purpose. I was a sensitive little kid, loved just being on my own, away from people, and a lot of walking around the farm and things. And as I say, I was, found it very uncomfortable being around my father. And eventually I was at boarding school by age 9, and boarded right through till I left school. Boarding school was kind of a relief because I wasn't around, and my mother, it just wasn't a good, and we talk about, but back then no one ever hugged, or no, but you knew if you were loved, and you understood, and when I used to go and stay with people, even if they weren't being hugged by their parents, you could feel, I always knew that I never had any of that. And so I think, that's sort of where it started, and this idea that, my mother had given me up, then my parents didn't think I was any good, or that's what I thought. Certainly my father made that pretty plain. And so you build this sort of armor around that you're by yourself, and you're gonna have to look after number one. And I think that's what I did. And then there's this sense of wanting to prove to the world that you're not damaged goods.
But when you met your birth mother, did that also open your eyes to kind of why you are the way you are?
Absolutely. And so when I met Gail, it was, I had just basically just got married to Lizzie, and I'd started Logan Brown, the restaurant, and I sort of always knew I was adopted, and I thought, oh well, I'm gonna write to SIPS and find out, where do I start with this? And I think I got a counsellor, call me back, and it happened very, very quickly, because I was 31 years old, and she said that Gail, about nearly a year to the day, had written to them to say if I should look for her, she would love that. So we had an address, and so I sent a letter and some photos. So after 31 years, Gail went to the letterbox, and there was a handwritten letter, of course, from me in there, and some photos. So which must have been extraordinary for her. No idea that was coming, and she wrote back immediately, and then we jumped on a call, and then I jumped on a plane and flew to Adelaide, and it was amazing. It was absolute when we went into her. She picked me up at the airport, and I'll always remember this. It's been 30 years or something since she'd given me away, and we were. It's hard because this is but in the airport, it was Adelaide. Wasn't particularly. We saw each other from quite a way away. It was like a slow motion movie, as we were walking towards each other, and just before we got, someone walked between us and dropped their bag, and we're looking up at the departure. And we looked at it was kind of beautiful because it had been 30 years, and here's another fucking roadblock, I'll never forget that. And but going back to Gail's home, and she was bottling 3 or 4 different types of olives. She was an artist. She was a potter. Mother was a potter. There were lots of things that rang true, and then I spent 4 days with her and met my two half sisters as well who are wonderful, Jane and Anne, and then it was funny. I'd never really thought about my birth father. I just wanted to know who carried me, and so right near the end of the 4 days that I was there, she said, would you like to know your birth father? And I hadn't, as I say, I hadn't thought of it, but I was like, sure, why not? And he didn't know anything about me, obviously, but Gail's friend Marnie, she's a ambassador too, by the way. She kept the secret. Gail, because Gail was whipped away when she got pregnant and went and lived with a doctor in Wellington or someone and gave birth. It was all very, sinful, and well, it was a different time, wasn't it? And so I said, yeah, sure. I'd love to. I hadn't thought about it, but it would be great to meet my birth father. And so Marnie had kept the secret, was that she knew that Gail, her best friend, had a child 30 years ago, and they'd still remained friends. So Gail sent Marnie a letter, and a handwritten letter to give, because Marnie knew Baz, my father, birth father, sperm donor. And so he, after 31 years, and couldn't remember anything. Yeah. Day, night, woman, or anything. So he sat on it for a while, for a week or two, and he just so happened to be flying down to Christchurch, and they were doing a piece on me and Logan Brown in the Kia Ora magazine. And so he saw that and saw me and went, oh, there's no question, I think. But he rang when he got to Christchurch, and I was in the middle of lunch service on the tools at Logan Brown, and the phone rang, and it was like 12:30 at lunchtime, and again I was like, yeah, no, I'll call you back. So all these moments and things, and then we spoke, and he said, look, I'm coming through Wellington, I don't know anything about this, I'm very confused, probably going to need DNA and blood, and I was like, for sure. And then when we met, I think we were in laughter before we even put the ticket to get out of the airport. We went back to Logan Brown and stayed up till 2 a.m, and there was never any need for any of that. It was and there was Baz, who was a fisherman, played squash, played rugby, all the things that I had done. So that meeting of the two and understanding, and Gail was just really, really soft and gentle, and I understood where I got that sort of part of it, and then I met Jeremy and Fliss, my brother and my other half sister, and the great thing about it all, because there was so much more in me that I wanted to drill down on with them, but Gail didn't want, it was too painful for her, and I respected that, to go there, and it wasn't, I think there was relief for both of them that I'd made something of myself, and I wasn't, screwed up or anything like that. But I never managed to really, especially with Gail, and I tried a few times, but it was just too painful for her to go there. I really wanted to, I guess, want her to know that it was okay, that what happened, I felt it was a time for healing and really talking honestly and openly about it, the whole thing and how it was for her, and but just and then Baz actually died last year, but I had some really good times, and everyone met everyone, which was Gail met Baz again, and but the beauty of the whole thing is that I met my half brother Jeremy, who now runs my business, which is extraordinary. He's one of the most incredible people I've ever met.
In episode 216, we talked to broadcaster Toni Street about working alongside Mike Hosking on 7 Sharp for 4 years.
Actually only on breakfast TV for 1 year, like full time, which I remember that was actually when I got offered the 7 Sharp job, I didn't actually want to take it. Because 7 Sharp, if you remember, the first year of it was a bit of a failure for everyone involved. And that's not to say the people on it weren't great broadcasters, but the concept wasn't well received and they just didn't quite, it had a lot of teething problems and the ratings weren't great. So it was kind of seen as a bit of a poison chalice. And I had been filling in on breakfast. I had done Saturday breakfast and it had done really well. And I'd finally got the big gig of doing full-time breakfast with Sam and Rawdon, who I got on with awesome. And Ant Stevens was my executive producer. So I was really happy where I was. And then they said, we want to take you off that show and put you on 7 Sharp. I was like, oh, really? Really? I know it's deemed as, because in Tallyland, prime time is deemed as where everyone wants to be, but I didn't really want to be there. I was like, I actually really love this gig.
Is it the kind of job you can say no to once your bosses come and say, we want to do this?
I didn't feel like I could say no to it because I did say that at the time. I didn't say, no, I don't want it. I said, oh, really? I've only just started on breakfast. I've had this great year. The team's going well. I also felt very loyal to Sam and Rawdon, and I was well aware that I was breaking up, which was quite a winning formula. So I felt a bit bad about that. Well, it wasn't my fault because they'd told me I had to leave, but you know what I mean. So I did have really hard discussions with the bosses that asked me because I was like, oh, I feel like this is not great for me. Why would I move from a show that's going really well to a show that's not? And they said, well, that's exactly why we want you to move, because we feel like something drastic needs to change. This is our primetime slot. This is way bigger ratings. I remember them telling me. And I was like, oh, yeah, but I feel like I'm, going to I never dreamed in a million years that I would be on the 7 o'clock slot. I grew up watching Paul Holmes, Susan Wood, Mark Sainsbury, and I never thought that would ever be a show I'd be on. So it was quite surreal to be getting offered the 7 o'clock slot. And I also didn't know whether we would be able to turn it around because there was a lot of negative sentiment towards the 7 Sharp show as well. And I thought, oh, God, But I felt like I had to say yes to it, and I knew I would need a really strong person to do it with, and I think Mike Hosking was absolutely the right person because...
Yeah, what stage did that relation get put together? Are they like, you're going to be on 7 Sharp, you're doing it with Mike?
No, they said, we want you to be on it, who do you want to host with? And I actually said at the time, I feel like there's only 2 people that can turn this around for you guys, and it's either Mike Hosking or Paul Henry. I felt really strongly about that because I felt like they needed someone, a reason to watch. Yep. And whether you love or loathe Paul and Mike, they were appointment type viewing, right? And I remember them saying to me at the time, oh, that's not going to happen. They'll be too expensive. And then Mike got the job. So I don't know what happened there. But, and obviously they had to want to work with me. So I was lucky that Mike wanted to.
Had you met him or crossed paths with him? Like, what was your interactions with him before you sitting on a couch at 7 o'clock?
No, I didn't know him. I knew his wife, Kate Hawkesby, because she'd worked at TVNZ. Briefly, we had some crossover. She was hosting the late news when I was there. It's not true. Mike had been in the newsroom filling in for Close Up for Mark Sainsbury before. So I'd had some pleasantries passing by, but I didn't know him at all. But I just knew that he was the type of person that people would turn into. And I also knew that I needed someone to offset how I was going to be. You don't want 2 people the same. And I knew we needed someone that was going to be possibly a bit controversial, that people were going to love or loathe, because I felt like my job was going to be to bring the warmth and hopefully the positive vibes.
That's so cool that you know your strengths going into a role like that and to be able to advocate for what is going to work.
Yeah, and I didn't think they'd get Mike to do it. So I was really pleased when they came back and said that he was going to host the show, because I had a feeling we would have good chemistry.
Yeah, I just watched the interview of the last show you did together at the end of the 4 years, and he got quite emotional at the end, and he called you guys the best duo in broadcasting.
I love it. Rate yourself.
But I wondered how you reflect on working with Mike. What is he like to work with? What is his method? How did you guys sort of figure it out?
Yeah, well, I didn't really know what to expect. I remember being a young reporter in the newsroom and thinking every time he filled in on Close Up, I felt like it was a really good show. So I knew he had that serious kind of edge to his news that I think 7 Sharp needed, because I felt like it had gone too far away from why people liked Close Up. So I knew he had that. I knew he had rated well. And the moment I met him, like, he is a no frills kind of character. You know, he was also on Newstalk ZB, so he was working double shifts. So he'd said yes to this, and that meant he was going to be getting up at 3 a.m. and then he was going to be coming at night. So he wanted to get in, do his job. He doesn't like any faff, none of the touchy-feely stuff, which is probably what I bring. So I found him really straightforward to work with. I knew where I stood with Mike. It would come to an interview and he'd go, "Do you want to do it? I don't mind." Like, he was very giving in that respect. And he's really funny in his sort of acerbic way. So I found him, he would absolutely take the mickey out of me. You know, like, I remember I was on a bit of a health kick and I had my carrot sticks and my little piece of, not the keto gummies. I had my carrot sticks and my little bottle of peanut butter, and he's like, "Do you reckon that's going to help you?" And I'm like, well, it's better than me eating a donut. But I kind of enjoy that. And I come from a family that gives each other stick a lot. So I enjoy that. I feel like people have lost the ability to laugh at themselves and not take things personally. And you had to not take things personally with Mike, because he just threw them at you. But I loved that. I looked forward to my afternoons because I was like, what's he going to say now? He's so inappropriate. And at one stage, he's trolling you for your afternoon tea. The next minute, he's telling me about his bloody Gucci loafers and his new fragrance and what wine he's drinking that night. And I'm pretty sure he looked at me like, "Oh dear, you don't even know what my wine is," because I'm like the basic girl from the farm. But we had that dynamic where I gave him stick for being a Remuera type, and he gave me stick for being the basic girl from the farm, and it worked. And I really enjoyed it. And he doesn't get on with everyone because Mike does his job and he doesn't have all the frills around the edges. But I found him really easy to get on with, and our relationship and chemistry was instant from the first photo shoot we went to.
He doesn't get on with everyone, but you get on with everyone. Like, it feels like is there anyone you don't get on with?
I don't think so.
Yeah, you've got that magic ability.
What I try to do, and I think this is why some of the duos I've worked with in broadcasting work, is I try and make the relationship work. And I think you have to, right? If you want a show to be successful, there has to be chemistry. And whatever it takes to make that chemistry as good as it can be, I feel like I'm quite happy to bend and mould to. You know, working with Mike Hosking was very different to working with Rawdon Christie, very different to working with Sam Wallace. You all have different dynamics, and you've just got to find what that commonality is and what that chemistry is going to be like. And I enjoy doing that. I enjoy sort of changing and morphing to make it work.
But with an underlying theme of warmth. That's the brand.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. And I don't think there's anyone that I don't get on with. I mean, there's people that I like more than others, of course. Yeah. But I don't know. Everyone's got a quality that you can bring out, right?
Very much so.
You're still in the same building with Mike at NZME?
Yes.
Are you guys still keep in touch? Do you bump into each other?
Do you know Mike Hosking?
Yeah.
He doesn't keep in touch with anyone.
No.
I used to text him on his birthday after 7 Sharp, but then I changed phones and I kind of lost his number. So now if I want to get in touch with him, I DM Kate, his wife, and say, "Hey, will Mike do this? Da-da-da-da." If I saw him now, we would catch up and we'd chat, and he'd ask how the kids are and I would ask how his are, but we don't catch up all the time.
All done in 2 minutes.
He's too busy. Yeah. He's too busy watering his, mowing his grass and cleaning his pool and watching the Warriors.
Yeah. In the middle of 2025, we travelled to Christchurch to record an episode with broadcaster Simon Barnett, which was an exclusive. He doesn't often do interviews, and he hadn't really shared much about his life since losing his wife Jodie 2 years ago. It proved to be the biggest episode that we've ever done. It was the most popular one on both Spotify and Apple charts, and it was the work we were most proud of across the year. In it, he shares his journey of losing his wife Jodie through her courageous battle with brain cancer, what that loss has taught him about life and perspective and being intentional with his time. This is a small snippet from the interview, but if you haven't listened to it, I can't recommend it highly enough. Go back and listen to the whole thing. It is a real perspective shifter, and there's just so much insight and depth to it.
But maybe more than anyone I think we've spoken to on this podcast, your actions have reinforced your beliefs.
Yeah.
You know, like that, walking away from primetime TV to be with your family. Like that is what you're saying. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because that's actually probably true. I mean, I am hard on myself, and that's what Joe used to say, you know, just give yourself a break.
Yeah.
Because, and my kids say that to me now, they say, Dad, you know, yeah. When Joe got sick, cancer's just, it's absolutely unrelenting. It is like rust. It just never sleeps. And you don't often sleep. And so this is a thing that gets lost sometimes in the mix of grief and why I talked before earlier on about how suffering is very unique, because there's just, see, even as a caregiver, I really backed off work. I couldn't work for a bit, and MediaWorks were amazing to me. So was in fairness NZME, they were real good in terms of giving me time. But even now as a caregiver, when everything was going on, I'd second guess myself and I say, have I done enough? Did I care enough? And the kids, I'm almost like a needy child, which is embarrassing at 58. But I'd say, do you think I loved Mum enough? Do you think I cared enough? And I remember when the morning she passed away, it was awful. And, you know, the people come around, and I can remember thinking I just was desperate for a coffee. And I just thought about that thing, how could you even want a coffee? But I didn't even know what I was thinking. So yeah, I've always been quite hard on myself as, you know, as a guy that was, and I really tried to take care of Jo. You know, like, I mean, brain cancer is just vicious. It's one of the worst in terms of what it takes from you. So, you know, Jo lost everything. She lost the ability to speak, move, shower. And so I tried to do that, and then bed sores, and I tried to do that to, you know. So I think I did as much as anybody could do, but it just never seemed enough for a woman like that. I don't know what would be.
All I know is from the people I've spoken to and the incredible write-up that Shane Curry did when he came to your house. And I think you do need to hear it. Like, you did an amazing job. Like, you couldn't have done, you know, you were working on News Talk ZB, and then the minute you were finishing, you were going and
you were working from your home.
Yeah. And like,
yeah.
It's a weird place for me to be, but I think I need to tell you, like, you did such an incredible job.
Thank you. Oh, well, thank you. And I mean, I'm not looking for that. I don't want people to think that I'm looking for this feedback, because I'm not. I'm just being honest with you how it was. And I think that's the one thing I felt when you asked me to do this podcast. I'm like, well, who would listen or watch it? Is there any interest? That's the needy part of me. And then, can I be of help? Because I want to be a help. That's the significance thing, I think, that I want to be of help, but I'm not quite sure how to help yet. But people have said to me they've read stuff like Shane's story. He was such a lovely man to me. Like, I mean, he's been a journalist for a long time, but he said, I think I'm accurately representing him. He said he's never been as impacted by a story. That meant everything to me, because he captured the love that Jodie and I shared, and that was, I wanted people to know how much I loved her and how much she loved me. Not to boast, not to say we had a greater relationship than anybody else. Please know that. It was just, I wanted people to know. And to that end, I got a guy who got in touch with me, and I really respected this. His name is Graham, and he said, I'm kind of sick of reading about you and your wife. And he said, why does nobody care about my wife that passed a year ago? And he put that in an email to me. And I loved that because I thought, I really get this dude. You know, like, I agree. If that was my wife and I'd been through the same, and some bloke on the media is getting all this. So I rang him and we had a great chat. His wife's name is Gail. I hope he sees this, and I can honour in some way Gail, his wife, and his daughter Grace. She was 21, lost her mum. And he's a farming, hunting guy, and he doesn't know what to do with his grief. And so we had a chat at 10 o'clock the other night. He just emailed me, said, I don't suppose you can have a chat. Had a chat with him, had a lovely, I hope I'm not speaking out of school here, had a lovely chat with him. And the poor man was crying. His friends don't know how to deal with him now. He doesn't know how to deal with himself. He's desperately lonely, you know, and got yuck thoughts, as we've all had. And there's just that commonality that he was able to ultimately get from me sharing my story, which is a good end. I was at the gym, and a guy comes up to me, and he goes, I'm really sorry to hear about your wife. I said, oh, thanks. And he said, I lost my daughter in a car accident when she was 19. And I said, oh, mate, because straight away, we're part of a club which nobody wants to be a member of, least of all me, because it was my worst fear. And he said, the thing is where we're at, he said, is nobody quite understands unless you've been through it. And he said, this is kind of a strange analogy, but I really understood it. He said, I guess it's like being an astronaut and you walk on the moon and you only ever really want to talk to other astronauts that have been there because they get it. And I don't know, that's kind of what it's like. That's that whole common but unique thing that I was talking about earlier on.
On Shane, so I worked for Shane for 12 years at the Herald, so one of New Zealand's most experienced and best journalists, right? And I think his comments afterwards were not the most he's been impacted, but also the most amount of feedback he had on a story. And I wondered what that maze of, I don't know what the word is, what that cloud looks like in the month after Jodie passes, because you must be getting so much people messaging you and wanting to stop by and wanting to support and not quite knowing what to do. Are you sort of just shutting everything out? Like, what does that look like for you?
A month after she passed?
In that 4 weeks, in that 8 weeks.
There was a lot of feedback, but it's weird. It was what got me through, because I was like, I'd read stories and random people. One woman got in touch. I didn't know who she was. She said, I flattered with Jodie in Topol for X. And she said, she was always like this. She was fastidious about backing the car out. Now, that's just such a puerile comment on the face of it. She was fastidious about backing the car out. Me loving that woman with every single fibre of my being, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so Jodes. So I'd laugh and then I'd bawl. And then I'd laugh and then I'd bawl. And so in the month afterwards, it was cathartic, I suppose, if that's the right word. It was. I wouldn't say healing, because I didn't think anything could ever heal me. My daughters will hate me saying this, but I just wanted to die so bad. I told Shane that, and Sammy read that in the story, and she said, Dad, that really upsets me, because, like if anything happened to you now, Mons couldn't cope without his chief, because I've got a beautiful relationship with my grandkids. And I was like, I couldn't even see that. I just wanted out real bad, too gutless to do anything about it, but just wanted out. And I didn't want out. I just wanted to be with Jodie. And with my faith, I really believed that one day I will be. So I just wanted it now. And I would lie awake at night and beg God. I'd beg him just to stop my heart. Again, I'm not being melodramatic. You want the truth unvarnished. Well, that's what it is. I'd lie in bed, 2 o'clock in the morning, couldn't sleep, look at her picture and go, God, please just stop my heart. I just want to be with her so badly. And I'll see my kids in time. It's pretty selfish, actually, when I think about it. I'm not like that now, although I regularly just think to myself, I just can't wait to be with her again. So
is that because the fist is starting to get...
Probably, yeah. But with that fist withdrawing, there's also an element of reconciliation and recognition that perhaps I'm never going to, be as happy as I once was. And that's quite a hard thing as well. I loved my life. I loved growing older. I loved it. When people say about their age, I'm like, no, I'm stoked. I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. My work's settled, and whether I work or not, I've got Jodie, and that's the thing I struggle with now. I don't have that. So have I? Maybe I'll find happiness again. I don't know. Happiness with, I don't know. I don't want. That's where I'm torn. My kids don't want me to meet anybody ever again, and they've made that very clear. And I sort of say, well, I don't know what's around the corner. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. So yeah, it's as you can tell, I'm still a bit messy with all this stuff in my head.
I can imagine. One of the lines in that incredible Shane Coe write-up, I think towards the end, is you just want to. You're not sure if you will laugh again. And this was the days surrounding when she was before she passed. Have you?
Yes, that's a great question. I'm delighted to tell you I have. I have and I do. And it's a genuine laugh. It's a real genuine laugh. And it's, definitely. And I remember saying to a friend of mine who lost his wife as well, and I said, do you ever laugh again? Because I was really worried about it. I was like, do you ever laugh again? It just seemed... And he said, you do, but it definitely takes time. And everybody's different, So, again, I mentioned to you about reading. I read a heap of books, and one was a great book by C.S. Lewis called A Grief Observed. And he lost his wife. He married late 55 to Joy, and then she passed away with cancer very soon after they got married, within a couple of years, I think. And he was absolutely, completely, wholeheartedly committed in every way, shape and form to this woman. She died. And he just says in the book, he woke up in the morning, he went to shave, and he said, I looked at myself in the mirror and he thought, what profit a man with a smooth face? And yet, what's the point of a smooth face? And it's just something at that moment I thought, that's it for me. Like, what's the point of anything? Like, why would I bother shaving? Why would I bother getting a haircut? It's just nothing. You kind of do go to rack and ruin, and you must look dreadful. Everybody told me that. Oh, you look dreadful. You need to eat something. I'm like, oh, well, you shut up. I can't.
I was curious about that aftercare element to it, because this massive part of your life is now no longer there. And are you left to fend for yourself, or do you have that support network gather around and bring lasagna and like all those like mundane things that people take for granted? And then when you're in a loss, all of a sudden it's like, oh, shit, how do I do anything?
100%. Well, you're right. But thankfully, that's where the church friends, and it's not exclusive to the church, a lot of non-church friends of mine, make meals and help me out. But again, my personality is weird, even within my own family. My sisters, who are beautiful people, loved Jodie desperately. They would knock at the door and I'd say, I didn't know you were coming, I'm just not up to seeing you. And they really struggled with that. My own mother and father, who I'm very close to, they really struggled. I was very isolationist, and that was my way of coping. I didn't even want to see my own kids for a bit. I don't know why I'm like I am. I can't explain that. But there's a verse in the Bible that says we don't grieve as the world grieves because we know what awaits. I have that. I have that. I have that a genuine faith that I believe I will be with Jodie again. But even with this real faith, that's true. We probably shouldn't grieve as the world grieves because we know what's there. But I'm in the interim. I'm sort of stuck here. And that's how I felt. I'm like, oh, how long have I got here? That's what I felt like. It's weird. So, but I don't know. I honestly don't know how I would have got through this if I didn't believe. And there were times when I'm a normal guy, you have doubts. You go, what if it's all make-believe? What if there is no God? But so I just fed myself. Just as, you go to the gym, do weights to build your muscles, I've got to build my spiritual strength. And that was like reading books, watching sermons, listening to people I respect who've loved and lost. And that was exceptionally encouraging. To this day, if I want peace now, I know people will watch this and think I'm nuts. But if I want peace, I'll watch a sermon.
In episode 230, we talked to investigative reporter Jared Savage about the realities of the New Zealand gang scene and all the current myths and misconceptions that are out there.
I think the biggest misconception is that it's not black and white. I think often in reporting on gangs and organised crime, it's easy to make people out to be goodies and baddies, and there clearly is an element of that in the criminal underworld. But there are shades of grey in between as well, and I think even what is a gang in terms of there are gangs and some of them are kind of more disorganized and chaotic and kind of certainly sort of products of their environment and their upbringing. And then there are other gangs who are far more sort of the organized crime, the guys that I tend to write about a bit more with the genuine international connections. bringing huge amounts of drugs in more than ever before. And so, but I think sometimes when we hear the word gang or patches or whatever it might be, people think about the stereotypical, what they have in their mind about who a gang member is or might be. But the reality is that there's a huge spectrum, and within different gangs, there are different individuals who might be more criminally minded than others, more influential in that regard than others. And so you can't just broad brush everybody and lump them in the same sort of room simply because they're a gang member. And I think the nuances of that are hard to get across in a 600-word news story. But I try and flesh that out a bit more in the books.
So I've read the third of the trilogy of books, and that is what jumped out to me, like gripping, like what a page turner from the start. But the complexity in all of these stories and the way you frame them, and then you understand like how it all came to be. There's so much. Yeah, I know exactly. There's so much going on there, right? You need a book or a long form podcast to get that message across.
Yeah, and it's kind of like even within that, like someone might have done something terrible in terms of being behind all these big drug imports, but there's always a reason for somebody getting to that point, or something that's happened in their lives, or the environment, or just their family life growing up. And so yeah, it's just sort of painting in between the lines a little bit, and it's sort of they are complicated stories, and not just in terms of telling them chronologically or in a narrative style. Like there's lots of ups and downs and twists and turns, and the police do a fantastic job investigating these sort of crimes as well. But then there's the wider social issues, which I try and kind of weave into, and that's not to make excuses for somebody's behaviour or what they might choose up doing with their lives, but it does provide a reason or a little bit of context as to how somebody could get to that point. And that comes back to that sort of misconception stuff before about sort of people might hold about gangs or gang members. I know a lot of gang members who are been up to mischief in their time, but are also great dads, and I've seen that, or care about their families or work hard in their jobs. And so that's something that doesn't always come through in the day-to-day kind of media reporting. And that's not the fault of, I'm not criticising journalists for doing that, but just having a bit more of a canvas to sort of paint those kinds of context and nuances is quite important.
I'm going to give you a hypothetical. Elevator stops and you're in with the Prime Minister.
Oh, nice, eh?
You've got 3 minutes to paint the picture of the criminal landscape from your perspective. What are you saying?
Prime Minister, when I first started reporting on this 20 years ago, a kilo of meth was a huge bust. That would have been front page news on the Herald and every other newspaper. 20 years on, the smallest drug dealer on the street would have 10 times that in the back of his car. So, the busts that we're looking at now are 400, 500, 600 kilos. Our local established gangs are far more sophisticated than you might remember as a younger person growing up. They're working with international syndicates, the Mexican cartels. The police and customs are drowning in their work. They need more resources and more support. But tackling supply alone is not going to solve this. We need to have a lot more resources invested into education, probably of primary school age children around the dangers and risks of drug taking. We need far more sort of resources put into counselling and rehabilitation clinics, particularly in the smaller rural communities, far away from the big smoke, because that is where meth in particular is having a disproportionate harm on our communities. They need help, not at the city 3 hours down the road, but there needs to be more localized help where people who want to get on top of their addictions can seek treatment easily. And then on top of that, I'm kind of trailing off there. Those are the key things. I think there needs to be a lot more on the rehab and the health and the education side of things, because that is how you lower demand. And ultimately, you need enforcement to tackle supply, and can't let the foot off the throat there. But if you reduce demand, then over time, that's going to have more of an impact.
Of all of the gang stories, that you've covered, is there one that's kept you up at night?
Truthful, honest answer, no. Obviously there's some quite disturbing yarns and things that have happened in those, but the ones that kind of affect me more are like the child abuse cases. And even before I was a dad, like they're hard yakka. So going back to like the Kahui twins being murdered sort of 20 years ago, I've covered the Nia Glassy case, the Moko case, more recently the Malachi Subech case. So those ones are hard because you're dealing with children, obviously, who are vulnerable, and some of the injuries and stuff inflicted on them are very hard reading. Most of the time, what the public will read in a story is a sanitized version of what has been presented in court. So, reading those, seeing the photos of the injuries, some of the stuff borders on kind of torture almost in terms of what's happening, and you just read that and go, how could that happen? Like, what's going on here? But just weaving into sort of the gang question around that is like, every time there's someone dies or a child dies, there's often a huge sort of inquisition. How could this happen? And they look at the failings of, the family members or the government agencies involved, and it's often the same kind of things repeating. And it's there's a national outpouring of outrage and sympathy and empathy for the victim, and rightfully so. But there are hundreds, if not thousands, of other kids being abused in some way, shape or form. Those are the kids that become gang members and then go on to cause trouble in their own lives. It's an intergenerational thing. So the sympathy and the empathy for the dead child, but those who survive, that kind of goes out the window a little bit when they get older, and not sort of seeing the bigger picture that might lead somebody to joining a gang and beating the shit out of somebody or being involved in the drug world. So and that doesn't mean people shouldn't take responsibility for their individual actions, but it does provide a reason for why someone might follow that pathway. And again, it's all interlinked.
When I was talking to people about having you on the pod, there was one common thread of feedback, like, the balls on that guy. How does he have the balls to write all this stuff, 3 books on gangs? But what's the reality? Like, is there a threat by publicizing this work? Like, has there ever been, I don't know, has it ever come to your doorstep?
Well, I only ever get worried about it when people ask me. So thanks, Steve, for reminding me of that. Truthful answer is we don't live in Mexico. We don't live in Northern Ireland. We don't live in Guatemala or lots of other countries where journalists are kind of regularly targeted for their work. It is an interesting one because clearly people are not going to like what I've written sometimes, but the sense that I get from people about it is there's also almost a professionalism about it. So the organised crime guys and gang members might be part of that. They're doing their job, doing their thing, right? Like that's how they see it, doing their stuff. That's their job. It's the police's job to catch them. And there's almost a professional kind of respect there. And everyone involved in the process is just doing their job. And I guess as reporting on it, I guess I'm seen as just doing my job. There has been the odd thing where people have been upset with what I've written, obviously. So with the first book, one thing that comes to mind is Gangland came out and I get a phone call from someone. This is back in Christmas 2020. Get a phone call. I was like, I don't know who that is. Pick it up. Hello, Jared here. And this guy just went off on me. He goes, rah, this book's come out and you've said X, Y, and Z about me and rah. And like, I've been out of prison and I've kind of turned my life around. I was like, well, hang on. Like, yeah, I understand that might be a bit confronting for you. Like, you're out now and you say you've changed. And, but hang on, like, I don't think I said those kind of things about you in that way. I was, where have you
Jared Gilbert.
It's Jared Gilbert. It's Jared Gilbert. And then I was like, where'd you hear that from? He goes, oh, my mate bought a copy and he told me that. I said, I've got the book here. Why don't I why don't we go through what I've said? I mean, he wasn't a main character. He was just an offshoot sort of dude. So I pick it up and I read a page to him, and he's just quiet on the other end. And I was like, well, that's what I've said. And he goes, oh, yeah, sounds about right, and hung up. Yeah. So, like, you know, people will have events. People will have their own opinions about it. They'll have a different take on events that have happened. But generally speaking, I've never had a physical threat. I've never had someone, touch wood, you come and knock on my door or wait for me outside the car. I think when things can get bad for journalists is when it becomes more of a chaotic or unplanned kind of interaction. So, you know, journos will often, we'll knock on someone's door if we want to try and get comment from them. That's a standard journalistic practice with the right kind of steps in place. I don't tend to do it for these kinds of stories. If I want to speak to somebody, I'll either go through an intermediary that I might know, or I'll write a letter and leave it for them. These guys are all over social media, so there'll be an Instagram message or a Facebook message or something, just to try and like broker a meeting or a conversation without sort of, when you're in the same room with somebody or at their doorstep, like, you know, who knows who will answer the door? Like, you know, it could be, that's when things can kind of spiral. So I do take those kind of precautions. But generally speaking, the people that I'm writing about, they're already often in prison. So there's not going to be an opportunity for me to kind of get me.
In episode 236, we talked to Brent Impey, who was, among other things, the New Zealand rugby chairman and before that, the MediaWorks CEO. We spoke about climbing the ladder to becoming the CEO of MediaWorks and negotiating their sale of $777 million.
You become CEO of MediaWorks for 11 years, and this is quite an interesting era of New Zealand media. There's the sort of television wars, and there's all sorts. You launch new stations like C4, Kiwi FM, Channel Z. There's network stars. There's $100 million deals. Like, what of that 10-year period, what stands out as the most interesting chapters?
When I took over, and I enjoyed working for the Canadians, they were terrific. TV3 was running at a loss of $12 million. They had bought the More FM group which was making about $3 million. But the TV needed sorting out. I remember going in there very early on and having a meeting with the management team and saying, well, we can't carry on like this. What are we going to do? And they had an HR department. And so I said to their HR people, well, come to me with a plan. So they did. And it involved getting rid of salespeople, news people, but none of them. So I decided, it was my first lesson, I'm not having HR. I got rid of a lot. And started teaching, hoping that my managers would learn to manage people. And they did. And so they started to identify the problems and where we could do better, whether it was in sales or whatever. Then the how are we going to win was the issue, and it came down to at TV3 we couldn't win 7 nights, but we might win 2. So we started really focusing on 2 nights a week, and things like Outrageous Fortune eventually came along, which did that. Sunday nights we were really strong, and then the investment in the news. We're going to make sure this is the best news service we can do it, and we had trouble. I mean, when I joined, there was a big issue over the hosts, which led in the end to John Campbell and Carol Hirschfeld being the front line, and Mark Jennings driving a winning culture, and we got there. So it was those sort of things. It was encouraging people to manage. It was management by walking around. So I'd go around all the time, and the team knew that we were in for the fight. And one of the most, if I think back about that time, one of the most remarkable things about it was that there were no leaks. There were no leaks anywhere. You'd never pick up a newspaper or anything like that and hear that there was something going on inside. It never happened. And why is that? It's because the people were empowered to do the job.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, in this period, I've got a lot of questions. I kind of have heard that you have this incredible skill as a negotiator as one of your strengths, and I wanted to sort of talk about that, the deal, like $777 million deal, right? MediaWorks got sold, and you're overseeing this. What does the nuts and bolts of that look like? What does the negotiation look like? What's your role in it?
Negotiations is about a number of things. First of all, making the other person comfortable, also being clear, and also making sure that your team is coming with you. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. We had a bit of a challenge in the 2007 World Cup. We had $12 million gone out in rights, and we had about 12 to 13 million in revenue. So we wanted this thing to break even and be a little bit better, but we couldn't afford for it to run at a loss. And then there were these rules on a Sunday morning.
Just for a point, this is the first time that TVNZ or One Sport didn't have the Rugby World Cup rights, right? This is the first time it's gone outside of that.
Correct. And how we got the negotiation over the table with World Rugby was to be able to persuade them of a younger, more active, more interested, as opposed to older and established. So that was how we got there, and to make them feel comfortable that they could deal with us and who they didn't know. But we had a problem, because if the All Blacks had got knocked out, we then had this challenge that we couldn't put advertising on Sunday mornings in the semi-finals and the final, and it was going to really cost us. So that was a challenge. So there was a bit of piece in the Broadcasting Act that said that that you could carry advertising if the majority of the audience was overseas, and this was done for Sky channels that came in overnight. So we thought, how are we going to get around this? We can't live like this. This is going to cost us too much money. So I came up with the idea of, let's do a deal with Papua New Guinea TV, because we've got 10 million people up there. So we got the feed in, and they took it. And the only condition they had to do was to play Heineken and BNZ ads and Port Moresby. That's fine. They were fine. They got it for absolutely nothing. But it's the negotiating around that is about making World Rugby feel comfortable to give it to us feeling internally as if we can do the job, and then persuading someone else that they're going to get a win-win out of it. So there's an example, television, just because you asked about that.
So you dealing with, are you simultaneously working those three parties to get that across the line, the Papua New Guinea element, the World Rugby element?
You're always working the deal. You're always working all parties, because you can't finish a deal until it's concluded, you've got to be on top of it all of the time.
Just a little. Did you win? Did you get around those Sunday morning?
We did
advertising laws.
Well, we kind of did, and we didn't.
You got a little slap on the wrist, didn't you? My research.
Yeah. We were then prosecuted because it's a stupid law, absolutely ridiculous law.
Still in place.
Still, I know. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Why is that in place when you can do anything on the internet? You can see advertisements everywhere else. Yes, they brought a case against us. We put up our argument and we got fined $500, I think. So big deal.
What was your relationship like with, this was the era of TV stars in New Zealand. As the CEO, what's that relationship like for you?
Just normal. Absolutely normal. I'd wander down into the newsroom. That's where most of the, quote, stars, unquote, are. Chat to them, sit down, have a talk, just make them feel comfortable. I also think in terms of, particularly in terms of personalities, they need to know that you've got their back. That's absolutely critical because they're out there every day, and if they make a mistake, they get criticised heavily. They've got to know when they are in that building that they're supported by the senior management. And because I'd done talkback and have been on air, I kind of knew a little bit about those pressures. I was never a star. I was a sort of a fill-in type. But I think that they knew that they were always supported. I hope they did. And if you ever talk to any of them, I hope that, they would say, well, yeah, he looked after us.
They did, yeah. A number of the contacts have said exactly that.
Well, that was the best of business for 2025. I just want to say a massive thanks to everyone who's watched and supported the show this year. It really means a lot to me and Seamus. We can't wait to do this all over again in 2026. 2025 has been a dream run for us. It's just been full of pinch me moments. We're so thankful for the audience and the listeners and you guys that are keeping us afloat and giving us feedback and listening to the show. We are excited and energized to come back with more fresh content and great storytelling next year.